Born in the morning, not yesterday morning. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of July 10th, 2023 to order. My name is JD Pachariva, Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. So, in the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see our deputy clerk. Devan, can you make... Okay, so we will follow Devan out the door and she will lead us to safety in the event of an emergency. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phones are either off or are on silent. And lastly, but not leastly, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. All members of council are present in person and remotely this evening. We also have staff in attendance in person and remotely. Additionally, we have representatives from Upper Canada Consultants attending this evening. Are there any declarations of interest with respect to tonight's meeting? I see none. Do members have any amendments to the order of tonight's agenda? Okay, I see none there. So, we have one statutory public meeting this evening. The purpose of the public meeting is to receive and consider comments from the public related to each item. This public meeting is to consider the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road, Camden, PD 31-23. We will consider the staff report associated with this item immediately after the statutory public meeting. Sections 5120 and 3412 of the Planning Act require that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must ensure that sufficient information and material is available to understand generally the proposal being considered, and council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of giving the public an opportunity to make representations regarding the proposed amendment or amendments. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Lincoln before the zoning amendment is approved or a decision is made on the draft plan of the subdivision, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT. Personal information is collected under the authority of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act and may be contained in an appendix to a staff report, published in the meeting agenda, delegation list, and or the minutes of the public meeting and made part of the public record. The Town of Lincoln collects this information in order to make informed decisions on the relevant issues and to notify interested parties of council's decisions. Names and addresses contained in submitted correspondence and other information will be available to the public unless the individual expressly requests the town to remove their personal information. The disclosure of this information is governed by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So, the public meeting is for the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road, Camden, PD 31-23. I will now ask our Director of Planning and Development to provide introductory comments. Mr. Bruder, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't want to provide too detailed comments as I know representative of the proponents team is coming forward to speak to the application, but this is the earlier stages, the public consultation piece or public meeting for a planning application to facilitate the proposed development of 27 single detached dwellings and 12 semi-detached dwellings in Campton. It's in the East End, really in line with a lot of the principles of the Campton secondary plan that was developed years ago from the standpoint of street connectivity and stormwater management, looking how there were to be conveyances and connections in those regards. So this is a piece of development on the East End that was envisioned to be redeveloped at some point. It's been long anticipated, even from a servicing standpoint as well. as there's been, this has been identified and included in consideration of upgrades that are now going to be proceeding or are proceeding for the Campton Sewer Pumping Station, the regional pumping station. So again, at this point, we're just looking forward to hearing input received from the public before staff come back subsequently with a recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. So there is one registered delegation for this item this evening. Please note delegations may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Once we have received the delegation, committee will transition directly into the report and motion. Our delegation for this item is Mr. Craig Rowe of Upper Canada Consultants. Craig, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. It's nice to be back at Town Hall for a public meeting again. I represent the applicants here. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants, and our address is 30 Hanover Drive in the city of St. Catharines. So as Director Bruder alluded to, I'm just going to provide a bit of a brief overview of the applications that are before council this evening for the public meeting, just to provide a little bit more context about what's being proposed and where some of the zoning departures are taken from. Thank you. So this first slide that we provide is an aerial image of generally the Campton urban area. Our subject lands are shown with the yellow outline on them. They're approximately 4.52 hectares in size. In terms of the developable area of that, it's about 3.4 hectares. Next slide, please. This slide just provides a little bit more of a closer aerial view on the property. The property is largely undeveloped, has been used for agricultural purposes. And towards the west side of the property, it's in a better state of condition than this aerial photo shows from a few years back, generally been cleaned up. But it's anticipated that as part of the approval of this, these lands will be consolidated together, and that will form the subject lands for the purpose of the draft plan of subdivision and the zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So this is the town's secondary plan for the Campton urban area. If I'll just get you to click one more time there, sir. Thank you. So in the red box is generally the location of the properties that we're discussing with this application. As you can see, the majority of the lands are designated with this orange honeycomb, which indicates these are lands for residential uses, predominantly detached development. And then the natural environment overlay that's on the eastern portion is inferred from some of the available MPCA mapping to deal with the Gavora Creek that goes through the back there, as well as some required floodplain setbacks and everything. So we've worked as part of our review to refine the exact location of that floodplain, and that forms part of our zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So this is the draft plan of subdivision that's before you. It's at a bit of a larger scale right now, so I'll just ask our assistant here to just click it and zoom in just a little bit closer. Oops, sorry, my mistake, different one. There you go. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I have a zoom in later on. Thank you very much. So generally, the form and function of the subdivision is we'll be taking a single access from Fly Road, and this will be a double loaded road that will go all the way up along Street A. Now, Street A has been designed generally in accordance with the location of where the road is proposed in the Campton secondary plan. We also have a secondary Street B, which provides a bit of circulation. It's intended that Street A is going to hook up with with the road that goes all the way westward through Campton. And I believe that there's already approved development that's there on Campton Road, and this would form part of the connection of that roadway. The semi-detached dwellings that are proposed as part of this application are located on the center island of development and also adjacent across from them, just down at the corner of their Street A and Street B. The stormwater management pond down behind lots 1 to 6 back there. That stormwater management pond has been designed to accommodate all the stormwater flows for the entirety of the Campton secondary plan area that's undeveloped. So any future development has had their capacity folded into this. So we're planning ahead to help facilitate those future stages of development. Just north of that is an open space block. This area contains the floodplain associated with the Gavora ditch that our field team went and completed a topographic survey of. It's intended that these lands are going to be dedicated to the municipality as a condition of draft approval. And then just to the north of that, there's 2 additional properties. It's tough to make out the text, but these are the remnant portions of the property, which are currently held by the owner. It's intended that these lands would be merged together, and they would be taking their remaining frontage just at the western northern limit of the draft plan. There's an 8-meter frontage that's remained there, and that's just for continued access to the agricultural property so they can continue to operate. Next slide, please. So in terms of the composition of the draft plan of subdivision, it contains 27 lots for single detached dwellings. And we've also included 6 blocks that will equal 12 semi-detached dwelling units. Our zoning bylaw amendment is having regard for the existing R1 zoning, which currently only permits single detached dwellings. And we're flexing that a little bit to allow for semi-detached dwellings to be permitted as well, subject to the R2 provisions of the zoning bylaw. The other component of the zoning bylaw amendment is the EC overlay, the environmental zoning, which will correspond with the block of open space and the floodplain associated with the Gavora Creek. There's some site-specific provisions that we've requested for both the singles and the semis, which include a reduced front yard setback of 4.5 meters to the front of a dwelling and 6 meters to the garage. Currently, the zoning requires 6 for both elements. A 4.5 meter setback is pretty typical in more modern development. It allows for you to augment the building, bring it forward closer to the street, and still provide enough depth for a parking space on the driveway as well. We've also asked for a rear yard setback reduction from 7.5 meters to 6 meters for all units to help make sure that we have a suitable development envelope for a variety of different housing sizes. And then lastly, we've also included some provisions to permit covered porches and decks, which are a common element found in a lot of new construction right now, but the town zoning bylaw is currently silent on it. Next slide, please. So this is just the development a bit of a closer aspect here. As you can see, those semi-detached dwellings are in the middle. So one of the policy tests associated with the Campton secondary plan is that it notes that all development should be predominantly single detached. Predominantly means the majority of, but it also provides a bit of flexibility in appropriate circumstances to consider other dwelling types. Based on the discussions with our client, we thought that semi-detached would be a good middle ground here to provide a bit of variation in housing type and affordability. So these have been located on the central island, and then block 28 and 29. These would be largely out of view from anyone driving down Fly Road. You'd really have to be in the middle of the subdivision to notice them. So it doesn't take any character away once built out from the existing character of Fly Road going through Campton. Also, with some of these smaller semi-detached lots, it provides a bit of a different living, almost like a condominium style, smaller yards, less maintenance. So it may be appealable to people of different positions in their life, and if they're looking to downsize and things like that, but still remain in the town of Lincoln. Next slide, please. These are some conceptual house plans that have been put together by our client who also does some building. So the top 2 are some single detached dwelling products that are similar to things that they built in and around Lincoln. Same with the bottom left. And then the bottom right image shows a conceptual drawing of what one of the semi-detached dwellings would look like. So as you can see, they're pretty similar in character to a lot of the newer existing building stock that's in and around this area, being 1 story or 1.5 stories, a bungalow or a bungalow, and then utilizing some of that additional height that's allowed to help have some architectural features like peaking and roofs and stuff, so it's consistent with the development in and around it. Next slide. So just wrapping up in terms of our public comments, we did have an open house that was held here on June 29th in the council chambers. We had 3 folks that attended that open house. One was a neighboring resident that lives just south of the subject lands, who had some questions about drainage. You know, that there's a lot of overland flow. We indicated to her that the subdivision development would hopefully remedy that, and she agreed to let us do a little bit of topographic survey through engineering just to make sure that there's no other external issues there. We also had a member of Walker Industries stop in just to see if there would be any impacts on the quarry and the quarry rehabilitation that will be occurring. Based on my discussions with him, he was of the opinion that there's no concerns from their end. I tend to agree with that, and we're not sure if they're going to provide any formal written comments, but they did sign in at the meeting. And also we had Councillor Timmers that joined us as well for that open house. Next slide. So in terms of our next steps moving forward, we'll be, of course, reviewing, addressing a public agency and council comments that we hear. The process for the town of Lincoln will be that the applications, once they're deemed appropriate by staff to proceed, they'll come to the committee to make a decision, and that decision will be then moved up to town council to make the final decision on it. And then if it's approved, we will be able to move into detailed engineering for the development and our clearance of conditions. So if everything considers on a good pace the way it's been going so far, it's possible that we'll have site works occurring in 2024, and we could see some of these houses being completed as soon as 2025 on the subject land. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the application tonight, or as a follow-up, if you deem it appropriate, I can follow up to any public questions if there are any this evening as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. Are there any questions from committee? Okay, Councillor Mikla, good to see you in here because this was your wish from one of our previous developments, but Councillor Wrenchman's going to start us off. But I wanted to recognize your query from the last meeting. No, you were okay. Councillor Wrenchman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is about there was some correspondence that we received at the last minute, or today, I shouldn't say the last minute, it was today, from some of the neighbors. And in there, it was noted that staff will be speaking with the applicant about some public space within the development. Can you speak to that?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair, we haven't had the opportunity yet to see the comments. I did have a brief discussion with the Director of Planning who's going to provide those over. One of the things that we wanted to do in terms of public space was dedicate block 34, which is the open space. But because it's hazard lands, it's not technically a parkland dedication, but it's a large open area that we feel represents a reasonable opportunity for a creative way for a little bit more passive recreation. We do note that there is a parkland block that's dedicated within the Campton Secondary Plan, which is a bit further west than this. So we were relying on that would be the parkland to support that area. We've indicated to staff a few times that we're happy to explore the options with block 34. And certainly if there's a desire for any additional open space, we can bring that back to our client.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have a question. I don't know if maybe this might be for staff.
Well, this is to the delegation. So
I
the
can
question to staff goes when we do the staff report, Councillor.
I'll ask the delegation then. Because you may know the answer, but also in the correspondence, there's a question about the town plan stating that only single detached dwellings are allowed. And the response from staff is that the current town official plan was consolidated in 2016. Since that time, there's been updates to provincial planning legislation, etc. So I didn't look into that, but if our official plan is only allowing singles, I don't know if that's true or not. Why is an official plan amendment not required?
Through Mr. Chair, it's a good question. That's why I tried to touch on earlier. So the wording in the Campton Secondary Plan is that development shall be predominantly single detached. It doesn't prohibit other forms of housing. So that was one of the discussions that we had with staff when we were doing pre-consultation. We were trying to find a way to integrate a little bit more of delicate intensification to their things that are context sensitive. From my planning opinion, townhouses may not be the greatest fit in here given the existing character, but a semi-detached looks very similar to a detached dwelling. And based on the location we provided in the plan, we provide, I believe, just about 1/3 of the housing supply. And that specific development is going to be for semi-detached. So it's a long explanation, but
No,
my interpretation on the wording is that it does provide a bit of flexibility. It just needs to be qualified, which I believe we've done through our planning.
it sounds like it does. Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bruder, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of reaffirm what the delegation was saying, the wording in our official plan isn't prescriptive. It's not, the words shall or must contain only single detached dwellings. The word predominantly is in there. And when you look at the ratio of singles in this site compared to semis, the staff were comfortable that principle's being upheld. And also a lot of that still is to do with the build form and the transitions and compatibility. But as you saw, looking at the elevations, even with some of the semis, they look very, very similar to what a single detached dwelling would be. So just to add that context from a staff point of view, and you're right, I probably should have included some of that in the staff response earlier today, but that is the other side of it. So appreciate it being brought up.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrick. Through you to Mr. Rowe. I like the plans. I like the housing. I like the bungalows especially. I see a house that I might be able to buy one day. The question I have is what market are these homes being geared to? What age demographic? Who are you anticipating are going to be purchasers of these homes?
Certainly, through Mr. Chair, the intention of our client is that these would likely be proposed to people that are transitioning or downsizing a little bit later in life. It's not to say that anyone's prohibited from buying a home in here, but based on the one level development, the size of the lots and having the variation for different amounts of maintenance required, it would be more suitable in their opinion for someone of retirement age or late in their career. So it would be not your typical newer subdivision that would generate a lot of younger families per se.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad you clarified that because like, I was gonna go down the same road as Councillor Wincham as well with the amenity space or the park space. And if it was going to be geared towards youthful or younger children, I'm looking at where this is located. There's no possibility really for sidewalks along Fly Road to get to any sort of park. So that would be a concern of mine is sidewalks within the community or the development itself. And I'm liking what I'm hearing about that block 34. If there's a possibility to use that land as amenity space or community space or park space, I think that would be great for the community overall. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva, through you to Mr. Rowe. So this infill is not typical for the Camden area. And I've had quite a few questions around the semis. And just if I could hear from you how and why you think that semis are a good fit.
Certainly, and thank you for the question. Through Mr. Chair, I think that the semis, from a planning perspective, are a good fit because they're a compatible built form. They're similarly scaled, and they're familiar. Some of the other forms of intensification that are permitted as of right now include things having a single detached dwelling and having accessory dwelling apartments, and then you can also now have another one. Whereas I think if you provide some of this purpose-built smaller scale development, such as a semi-detached, it has a different end user in mind that requires perhaps less space, and it has a way of integrating there and fully optimizing and using the lot. So rather than adding in intensification after the fact, we built it right into the plan from the get-go. So that form of development, I think, is favorable from a planning perspective. I think it works well, and you would be able to, in my own opinion, I would say those are more compatible, say, than the smaller singles you see immediately to the east of this subject land that are very narrow in 2 stories and slightly out of character. But also the location that we put them in was thought out as well, as to make sure that they're not detracting from the Fly Road streetscape and the character of Camden. As they're internal to the subdivision, you would only see them if you were living in that area or going through it.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair. So just another question around the semis. So, parking is always something that comes up with every application. And being it's Camden, Camden is not Beamsville. You can't walk to the store, you can't walk to the bank, you can't walk. There's really nowhere to go other than the general store. So parking is going to be very much needed. So with these semis, they're going to need 2 cars in the driveway, not 1 car in the garage and 1 car in the driveway. Like, we're very car centric in Camden. Like you have to drive everywhere you go when you live there. So just a comment on that. So if you have any details around parking and what would be the standard for a semi there?
Yep, certainly. If I could just maybe get the draft plan of subdivision brought back up on the screen. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So the intention would be with the semi-detached that at minimum you'd have 1 parking space in the garage and you would have 1 in the driveway. The orientation of the semi-detached lots that we're showing is facing the houses to the east and to the west. As you can see, we have about close to 60 meters of flankage along Street A and Street B. So this would probably be the predominant area of on-street parking that would be available immediately adjacent to the semi-detached dwelling. So we would have that off-street opportunity there. Through the design of these semi-detached dwellings, there could be some work done to have typically a little bit of a wider driveway to maybe accommodate 2 vehicles, but we'd have to make sure that everything was done in accordance with the zoning bylaw. But at minimum, we'd still provide the 2 required per unit.
So I just need a little clarity. So did you say 1 in the driveway and 1 in the garage? Is that the plan right now?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, at minimum, that would be it per property. Yes, a minimum of 2.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. So I do have a lot of questions that I'm going to reserve for the staff. So I think I'll end it at that point. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions to the delegation? Okay, so there being no further registered delegates, if there are any persons present wishing to address council regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road, please come forward and state your name, spelling your surname for the record.
I'm Linda Morose, I live back in the.
Thank you. I'm not very technologically oriented, but so thank you, council, and thank you to Upper Canada for your presentation. Appreciate it. I just had a question. I mean, of course, about, you know, we know that that's been slated for development for a long time, and now it's coming to fruition. We have, you know, we had quite a few questions and comments that we just were interested in finding answers to, which, Matt, thank you for your responses. My question, and I don't know if you may have answered this, so my apologies if you have, but we're concerned about we have a working pear orchard, and we're concerned about the impact or the perceived impact that may occur with neighbors who are backing onto that our property. And I'm wondering what provisions can be put in place to safeguard against that. I'm familiar with not that familiar, but I've heard of a warning clause being put into each of the purchase of sale agreements so that people are well aware of what they would be getting into. Now, we've taken lots of precautions over the years. We've been good neighbors, and we've had great neighbors on both sides to offset that from, you know, that concern. And we're not though prepared. We did have taken down some trees, which we were agreed to, but we're not prepared to do that at this point because of the impact to the crop yield and the production. So I'm just wondering what can be put in place, and if it could be a warning clause in that, in the purchase of sale or in whatever agreements are made.
Okay, and now Linda, you're 4105 Fly Road?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bruder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good question for sure. It's something our official plan contemplates as well whenever we have an interface between, you know, a residential dwelling and agricultural land use. There is some verbiage in there that leans itself to us considering ways to mitigate that kind of the transition between the two. Warning clauses are certainly something that's been used before. Typically, something like that would get finalized should this go to the next stage of the development path, which is site plan, more detailed design. We would figure it out at that point. But there's other aspects too. You know, we can look at things. I notice kind of the transition the way it is now between your property and the subject lands. There's a good line of mature trees. I think you might have taken some down, but I think there's.
Well, we took 6 pear trees down to offset the overspray.
Yeah, and I think there was some existing vegetation like close to or along the property line.
I think that was the neighbors, and I think they did take that down a
Yeah.
while back. Yeah.
Okay, so there's opportunities from a landscaping point of view as well to kind of better define that transition. Typically with developments such as this subdivisions, we don't mandate, you know, the requirements for things like fences, but again, something we can further explore as we go down the road, but definitely there are some opportunities to look at that transition.
That's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And Mr. Bruder, you know what, I think fencing would be an opportune thing to look at. My brother had a farm and with an infill lot that happened, and when, you know, first off, when people purchased the house, they're backing on a vineyard. And then they slowly started to use that for dumping of yard waste, and then got upset at bird banger. So Linda, a great question, because if it's laid out right from the beginning what the expectations are, then there shouldn't be any surprises or controversy between you and the new people. So I think fencing is a must, and I think it would go a heck of a long way to stop any potential conflicts.
Yeah,
on that side.
that's
And good
really
question.
thank you. That's what we're really interested
Yeah.
in. I mean, we don't want conflict.
No.
You know, nobody does, but we have been really, you know, we've had, like I said, we've had great neighbors on both sides. We've tried to be good neighbors, so
Yeah.
we just want to mitigate whatever issues that might arise. So thank you.
No, terrific question.
Okay.
So thank you very much. So, there being no further registered delegates, are there any other persons present wishing to address council regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road? Please come forward and state your name, spelling your surname for the record.
Thank you, council and staff. Jim Bucknell, Homeview Farms, 4113 Fly Road East, Campton. On behalf of my wife and my grandson and his wife, we're in transition currently, primarily to have the farm transition into their hands down the road a ways. But more importantly, for Len and Doug Troop, Lakely Orchards, they ran our pear orchard, mostly Bartlett and some Bosc pears. My nephew Rob also has the open land that adjoins this property line as well. And surprising thing happened here a couple of years ago that kind of confused us. A little bit of history here too in regards to the farm, but it was probably about 7-8 years ago anyway now or more that I had another acquaintance was interested in it, and we went to meet with this Upper Canada consulting and firm, and Loris Sinke and his son, some of you folks know Loris's building contractor. And but at anyway, the subject came up. Principal of the company, I think Haida Coop was the name, but he mentioned to us that morning, and the other fellow that was with us, that Nick Van Overen was interested in this subdivision at that time. So we just keep that thought in the back of your mind. Another few years up, a couple of years ago, Dwayne, and that's Nick's son, principal of this development, they clear cut the trees, nice cedar hedge that Dwayne's grandfather, Conrad Van Andel, had started years previous. He had the vision and saw the problem. When the troops come in to spray, the prevailing winds of this area are mostly southwest, although we do get some northeast. But anyway, that spray will carry right over that first row of 4 or 5 houses right there. And now, when they clear cut that chunk of cedars out of there, I begin to think, well, maybe the idea of a subdivision was gone, but there's some serious consequences there that we've got to be careful of. Now, in consultation with Hugh Fraser, now some of you know that name as the fellow that wrote that wonderful book of 50 Swing Beam Barns of Niagara. And of course, my barn and Wally and Linda's house now are with the Town of Lincoln Historical Committee and under the Ontario Heritage Act. And but Hugh, he has told me that there's a clause that municipalities have been using for several years now, called warning clause, that is to be applied to any sales and people that are buying these houses. That warning clause has to be in there to protect the farm interests, normal farm practices. That's our main concern. I think it fits that number 10 on page that, the questions that could raise. But, I'm concerned about that open space in those trees. Apparently, the garden was being too shaded, and so they cut the trees to allow the sun to shine on the garden, and now they've got a swimming pool there, but somehow or other, that section's gonna have to be rectified again, to accommodate, the houses going in there next to that. I'm afraid of it, and, that, number 10, no. That cane will stay there. I was reading it earlier here, and, it states that, there's not going to be a, it would be requested that the developer be responsible for installing a berm or fence along the property line between the developed and the adjacent property. There is currently no requirement for fencing, as this is typically a decision point of future residents. That said, this can be further reviewed with the proponents. So somewhere along the line, I'm trusting you people to keep that in mind, and that clause that warning clause that needs to be addressed. Any more questions?
Mr. Bruder, do you want to
Sure, Mr.
address
Chair.
Mr. Bucknell's a couple questions there?
For sure.
Yeah, warning and
For sure,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, that is something like we were saying earlier that we can explore during the site plan. There are certain warning clauses that can be included, really with the intent is just as you said. You've got residential development that's going in there, but you want to protect the adjacent farm practices. Definitely understandable, especially where there's interface between, an urban settlement area or a settlement area and a rural area. So definitely point well taken. And as I mentioned before, we will be looping back with the applicant after this to talk about other ways to look at that transition and mitigate any potential impacts. So something we're definitely carrying forward.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva. Thank you, Mr. Bucknell, for being here tonight. And I can relate because we had a development built right beside our farm property, and 9 of the houses backed onto the farm, which was an active field. And there was a chain link installed, but we were dealing with tractors on the field, whereas this is a little different with spray. So, a berm with cedars, maybe a chain link with cedars, but they're gonna have to be big enough to block that spray. So I don't know. It sounds like, our planning staff have heard your comments,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that, there's something that could be done there. And as well, the residents moving in absolutely need to know that this is what's gonna happen in their backyards. Because some of the residents that live still beside us are constantly requesting written invitations of when the tractor is going to be out there.
Yeah.
And in the one section where there is no fence, the resident there is encroaching onto our land regularly.
Mhm.
So, you want to help both sides. So your comments are very
Yeah.
well said. And thank you, Chair.
thank you very much, Councilor Timmers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bucknell.
Okay.
Mr. Bruder, you've heard loud and clear that this might be a touch point, or not a touch point, but a point of maybe future conflict or consternation or controversy, the 3 Cs. So we'll address that in the site plan. So, okay. Once again, there being no further registered delegations, are there any persons present wishing to address council regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road? Okay, so thank you very much. The public meeting is now adjourned. In this, in addition to the delegation, there's a written correspondence for consideration with respect to this item received from Linda and Wally Morose, dated July 6, 2023, and Ken and Laurie Toonstra, dated July 9th, 2023. So there being no further delegations or information for this item, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers. The council receive and file for information the following delegation and written correspondence regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road, Craig Rowe, Upper Canada Consultants, Linda and Wally Morose, Ken and Laurie Toonstra, and Jim Bucknell. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Mayor Easton, I'm looking for your, oh, thank you. It just came through. I will close that and that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, DeVan. So we will move directly into report PD 31-23 regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by Upper Canada Consultants for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road. Are there any questions from committee? Councillor Renshima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Bruder, the staff information report says that there is a heritage impact assessment. What is this for and what were the findings?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's correct. That's because there is a heritage property just to the west of the subject lands, owned actually by Ms. Morose, who spoke this evening. It was recently designated. There's historical value associated with the house and landscape. So just because this property, it's adjacent to it, doesn't include it, but there still needs to be a heritage impact assessment just to be sure that nothing is going to be impacted on the adjacent lands. That assessment was undertaken and submitted as part of this application. There were no reverse impacts to any of the heritage attributes identified, but there was certain things just from a mitigation standpoint that the report recommended. One of the things was looking at some vegetation in terms of the buffer between the two properties. Also looking at just doing some pre-construction surveys, things like that, to make sure any vibration or anything happening from adjacent construction isn't impacting the property to the west. But the overall findings were that the actual development, like the proposed development itself, doesn't have any impacts to the adjacent heritage attributes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you very much, Chair Pachariva, through you to Mr. Bruder. So I have some questions around the green space area, and I'm wondering how it will fit within the development and access for families that are living in the area. You know, for the past 9 years, we've been trying to find a park space in the Camden area, and there just has never been a property that's worked out or that's appropriate. So we're putting a lot of hope on this piece of land that perhaps it could provide a green space, active park area for the families, not only in this new development, because I foresee a lot of young families moving in there myself. When we look at all the other developments, they're full of young families and children. So we have Camden Estates, we have Mountain View, not Mountain View, what is it? Mountain Village Estates. So many houses. So how do we connect these other developments safely to make this a usable space? I know that was a long question, but I'm turning it over to you, Mr. Bruder, for comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Good questions for sure. And I can appreciate the challenges with provision of open space in Campton. I've been part of many of those discussions trying to work out a solution. It was alluded to earlier in this meeting, but there is a piece of land that has been kind of put aside for potential open space development that's a little more central to Campton. But again, that's as part of a secondary plan that happens over time. It's not something that's immediately forthcoming. So, you know, looking at this particular piece of land, we've got a stormwater management block and another potential block that's open space. You know, combined, they're a little over 4 acres in size, so pretty sizable. And the thought is that, you know, when you look at things like the stormwater management block, there's certain things obviously subject to further design, but that can be done to kind of make that also serve as an open space from trail connectivity out to Fly Road and within to this site, because this site will ultimately connect over to Mountain Village Vineyard subdivision that's over to the west. As part of the Campton secondary plan, there's a road that'll go through there as well. That has been considered in the design of this particular proposed development. Very good linear connectivity that can happen in the future when that road comes through. But in the meanwhile, I was talking with Director Graham about what can be done to bring in some of those other areas of residential development, because when you look at Campton as a whole, it's about, I think we talked about this earlier, about 1.5 kilometers across. So, when you look at Fly Road and connectivity and what can be done there, I think there can be some conversations that can be undertaken, and we can look at that in terms of future work to extend the sidewalk. We'd have to do it in collaboration with the region, of course, with Fly Road being a regional road. But again, just connecting further out to the east, because again, this development, or at least a form of development on these lands, has been anticipated for quite some time. So that's something that we're definitely actioning. It's good timing too, because we're looking at undertaking our development charges study. So looking at potential inclusion of something like that moving forward. But again, just looking also at trail connectivity, perhaps through the stormwater management block, but definitely to the open space. And connecting into this existing or this proposed subdivision, which would also have a connection point out to Fly Road, and then looking at future connections as well as we move forward. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
That does. Thank you, Mr. Bruder. For sure, we would need to look at possibly extending the sidewalk, and maybe, I'm just putting this out there now, is looking at the four-way, the intersection downtown Camden. Maybe that we're gonna have to make some safety improvements there, because if we're, putting somewhere for children to go and families to go, we want them to be able to cross that road safely to get there. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair Petrie, but through you to Matt. In looking at the Upper Canada consultant's presentation on slide 5, like I do see that road, that Street A that goes north and then west, and it looks like it's going towards future possible residential development. Am I correct in that?
You, Mr. Chair. Yeah, actually, in an earlier slide in the presentation as well, showed that kind of orange honeycomb. That's potential for residential development that's been designated in the official plan. And the Campton secondary plan envisioned, when that happens over time, that linkage happening, that east to west linkage there via what is shown here as Street A over to Mountain Village Vineyards, which goes out to Campton Road. Yeah.
So my thoughts are that there is a park there that's been, or there is land that has been allocated or set aside for parkland. There is a possibility that this piece of property could be accessed from the north as opposed to Fly Road, perhaps one day. And I'm just wondering if, thinking that and thinking of connectivity and moving people, like, should we be considering a sidewalk that runs along Street A in the least towards going north and then west towards that possibility of accessing a park? Maybe not this year, next year, but 10 years from now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question. And definitely we should be considering that, Councillor. And it's something, when we look at this particular design for this proposed subdivision, that we would look at, making sure that this design would allow for that. And then looking forward, when that east-west connection is finalized and it goes all the way across, that's definitely something we would want to provide as sidewalks along there for sure.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Easton.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak to the issue of normal farm practice. And I think that there's no question that Mr. Bruder has this sorted out. My concerns are in terms of the change in use. Right now, a lot of this is cash cropping. That could change. Pears are very, very popular now. And so I am concerned that that the onus will be on the farmers to come up with the mitigation measures. And I wouldn't like to see that. So I just would like to have a little bit more information from Mr. Bruder regarding the minimum distance separations, whether or not we may have to make some changes to that bylaw to accommodate what needs to take place here. And I'm very pleased to hear that those with the pear orchard have been encouraged not to take down any more trees, Mr. Chairman, because that's exactly what shouldn't be happening. If there needs to be more land, if there needs to be more space to accommodate the drift, then that's going to have to come on the that onus should not be on the farmers. And I'd like to hear Mr. Bruder's comments to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when you talk normally about minimum distance separation, a lot of times when you consider that from an OMAFRA perspective, that applies to farms with livestock typically, not to crop production. But I would also highlight that the way our official plan is laid out with some of that wording that I mentioned earlier about considering that transition point, it's fully intended that the onus to consider that is on the proponents that are proposing the residential development. And the whole point of those clauses is to protect normal farm practices and make sure that they're not impacted by new development coming in, recognizing that there are settlement area boundary limits that are going to transition with farm properties all the time in Lincoln. And there are already many that currently exist. So the idea is to not hinder or for lack of a better term, put it on the farmer to try to mitigate those things. We're trying to identify ways to do that, whether it be through some of these warning clauses that we're talking about so the residents are aware, whether it be through some physical separation that we can include in the detailed design. But the idea is for that to be addressed as part of the development applications, not for the existing farmers on the farm parcels.
That's great, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to have that on the record. And the hazard land, the block 34. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what other members are saying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What other members are saying in terms of some connectivity to Street A, so that some advantage can be taken in that area. I just want to confirm that with Mr. Bruder.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, absolutely, Your Worship. There's already connection contemplated out to it from the development that will go out to Street A. So definitely looking to make sure that connection piece is there. And I just wanted to highlight, I know it's being referred to as hazard lands, but there's going to be further work done with the Conservation Authority as well. You can see on the plan, there's the channel on the eastern limits, and there's also a buffer area, but you'll see there's a fairly decent portion of block 34 that's outside of all that as well. So there'll be further dialogue there and how we can maximize the space, utilize it for an effective open space for residents. So some of those details still to come, but there's definitely going to be options for those lands, and we'll make sure that there are connection points.
Okay. And thirdly, Mr. Chairman, just to confirm that the discussions that we're having that are not directly related to this project, but have an indirect relationship in terms of long-term planning, the park area that Councillor Timmers was talking about, through you to Mr. Bruder, we can rely on those also being included in this in the final report that comes forward. Is that a reasonable expectation?
You, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, Your Worship, you're just saying that we'll consider those lands as well that have also been kind of set aside for potential open space development when we come back with a recommendation. Is that right?
That and any other opportunity that might fit well with what's happening here to ensure that we can make the community as complete as possible.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, definitely, Your Worship. I think, we've been hearing loud and clear, especially out in Campton where there aren't any open spaces that are currently provided that are town owned. So we'll be evaluating all options on the table, as we already have been trying to work with the current property owner where that open space that's set aside is located as well. Because, we want to make sure that whatever's done there also, they need to be okay with it too. So considering all those properties, absolutely, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship. So there being no further questions, I have.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have Councillor Russell.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Bruder. A question about the on-street parking. I know this is probably going to come up during the site plan approval if it gets to that step, but is there a way that we can maximize on-street parking? I know that, again, it seems like a very condensed area with a lot of curvatures that will prevent some on-street parking in some major areas here. In a lot of areas in Beamsville and urbanized locations, there's the ability to have that extra on-street parking if it's required, kind of be facilitated by the adjacent neighborhoods, but we don't have that ability here. So I'm wondering if there's any ability to maximize that through the design plan, either through configuring of the driveways, just to make sure that, again, in between properties, we can try to find a spot to fit at least 2 cars per back-to-back units. Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, yeah, definitely. And it's something that actually I was speaking about with Mr. Rowe today. Just looking at future design, I believe the intent here is we're going to be looking at, you spoke of driveway configurations, perhaps twinning where we can. The driveways just to provide more room in between at that point to provide, maximize the spaces for on-street parking. Then in addition to considering the flankages, as Mr. Rowe mentioned earlier, along the semis that are within the center block there, I think between those two options, we're going to be doing everything we can to maximize some on-street parking. I think we can, provide a good number. I don't have the exact figure for you yet, but those two measures, I think, will definitely yield some positive results with some on-street parking opportunities, notwithstanding some of the constraints you identified with some of the curvatures.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I look forward to that in the site plan if it gets to that point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Russell. Okay, so there being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. The committee recommend to council the approval of report PD 31-23 regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, PLZBA 202-20146 and PLSUB 202-20147 by Upper Canada Consultants on behalf of Dwayne Nicholas and Marianne Vandenover for 4091 and 4075 Fly Road, and that a recommendation report be prepared once all comments have been received and any identified issues have been addressed. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I will close that vote and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Devan. We're now going to move on to our consent agenda. So we have one item in tonight's consent agenda. So the Museum Advisory Committee minutes of April 20th, 2023. Would any member of council like to remove this item from the consent agenda to discuss? Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, July 10th, 2023 be adopted as recommended. Museum Advisory Committee minutes of April 20th, 2023. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. So now we're moving on to the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda for tonight's meeting. Delegations, we have none. So we have one report. We are now considering report PD 3023 regarding Bill 23 heritage impacts and designation priorities. I will ask the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Matt Bruder, to provide introductory comments. Matthew, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, this is an update for council on some of the work that's been done. It's all been precipitating from the changes that have come out of Bill 23, specifically the changes on how we evaluate heritage properties that are currently on the non-designated list, as you're all aware, shortening that timeline for us to decide if we want to move forward with designations or not. A very onerous process to have the list completely evaluated in 2 years. So what's happened is the Heritage Committee, there was a subgroup that was struck to look at how we triage the properties on the list. Looking at it required a lot of research to look at, some of the potential characteristics or attributes they might have, or their heritage value potential. And then we moved forward, or the Heritage Subcommittee rather moved forward with, developing a priorities list. So it's bringing that forward now and seeking committee and council's endorsement to move forward now with undertaking that work. Also in this report is touched on is the Heritage Conservation District. A lot of properties that are on that non-designated heritage list are within that area. That's why we chose it for evaluation. So, you know, Bill 23 really changed the goalposts in terms of the evaluation needed to really assess those properties in that context. So that was a lot of work that was undertaken as well. And we're now at the point where we're ready to move forward in that regard as well. But really, this is an update to council. And really the main focus of this report is to bring out, you know, how those priority properties are laid out and identifying the next steps, which would really be for the Heritage Committee, which has been trained now. We had a training session with Grimsby on how to do some of the research that goes into completing these heritage impact assessment or these heritage designation assessments. So moving forward with that work now, starting with the highest priority properties.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. So do members of committee have any questions? Okay. Councilor Minchima.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some clarification on the wording on page 6 under public engagement matters at the bottom of the page. The wording says that going forward, designations may now be initiated by staff and or the Municipal Heritage Committee in response to Bill 23. And council may not request or require consent from a property owner prior to considering designation. I think what that means is that we don't need to, but I'm just looking for clarification on the wording. Council may not request. It almost sounds like we shall not. So is it just the way I'm interpreting the wording?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's just, it's may not, and really what that is we can initiate, you know, the notice of intention to designate should we wish. We can initiate all the research. At the end of the day, obviously, the property owner still have some say. They're able to appeal if they don't like the path that's being taken in terms of the designation process. But it doesn't say shall not, like it's not intended to say anyway that there shall not be no consultation. It's just there may not is probably a more appropriate term. But regardless, the property owners are still going to be involved in the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
You okay with that? Okay. Cool in the gang. Councilor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva. I can't let this pass without having some comments on it because I was on the subcommittee and it was an incredible amount of work. And I know in the report, it does say that these photos are not in any specific order. So I just wanted to you know, clarify that for sure so that council members aren't looking and thinking that this is how we're going to start working because these are just in no specific order. And there's also some in the priority 1 list that perhaps are not at risk at this point in time. So there may be some properties that the Heritage Committee will decide to move to the priority 2 that we may find are more at high risk or more priority. So I just wanted to put that out so that council is aware and they're not just looking at these photos and thinking this is where we're designating, because there are some properties on here that we know are already agreeable to designation. So we're not going to be in a rush. We need to hit the ones that are truly at risk. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Councilor Timmers. Councilor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva, through you to Matt. Those homes or those houses listed on or properties listed on these designated lists, do we proactively reach out to these property owners to let them know what's going on or what could be going on with regards to changes in Bill 23, or do we seek feedback proactively?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't sought feedback specific to the changes resulting from Bill 23, but we would just via the notice of intention to designate if we were to go down that route. Again, they would get notified. That is something we would normally do. Grimsby's already done a lot of work in this regard as well. They have sent out quite a few notices of intention to designate, and that's when some of the dialogue can happen with some of the property owners, and does happen. So they are consulted with, and we are bringing them up to speed there. We don't proactively go out specific to the changes for Bill 23, but as part of the whole process when we're considering these sites, especially these higher priority sites, definitely there is some outreach.
I was aware of that, but like is with respect to the possibility of having a property only on the list for 2 years, following that, if nothing happens, then it gets dropped off for 5. Is, like to seek feedback, whether or not residents or owners of these sorts of properties would be in favor of that sort of plan or not. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Through Mr. Chair, we haven't done that to date. No.
Okay, I'm just curious if we should or is it feasibly possible, or is it just too many? There's 200, there's a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question and something staff can definitely consider further. There are quite a few properties. There's also quite a few different levels of priority, and some we might still not go forward with any further evaluation at all, especially when you get further down the tiers. But perhaps for some of the priority ones, something staff can definitely take away, and I can provide you with an update on that offline if you like, Councillor.
Thank you.
Sure, I want to acknowledge all the work that's been going on, because I know that over the years, there's been a lot of work, and there continues to be a lot of work just getting to this report. There's a push now that if we want to do some of this, we have to do it within a certain time frame, and things have changed. So there's a lot of work coming. And in the report, there's reference to potential additional staff in the long run. I could see that being important, that existing staff have help. So do we know what that looks like? Are we looking to contract someone out in the long run? Have we thought that far down the line, or is this step one?
Mr. Bruder.
To you, Mr. Chair, good question too. Something staff have been talking about for quite some time now. There's a bunch of other tools that we can kind of leverage at this point that don't necessarily mean hiring a new dedicated staff, at least for the time being, to get going on this. As I mentioned, there was a full training session for the Heritage Committee. A big portion of this workload is doing all the research and, the approaches, and looking at, that research in the context of really the evaluation framework, which is laid out fairly clearly by the Ontario Heritage Act. So to have that training and have the committee members or some of the committee members be able to undertake some of that work in advance is definitely valuable. I would also note too, we do have a firm on retainer. It's an urban design firm when we want to do, third-party reviews from an architectural or urban design perspective. They are there at our disposal. They actually also have a branch that deals with heritage considerations. So that's another potential source we can leverage, especially when we get really far down the line and we're almost ready to complete the designation reports. They can be the final lens in which we look at that. So while we can continue to talk about how we deal with, hirings of staff as needed further down the road, there are these tools as well that we can leverage in the interim, and we will be.
Okay, thank you. I guess there's going to be further discussion as we go, see how it goes. Thank you.
Okay. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers to receive and file report PD 30-23 regarding Bill 23 Heritage Impacts and Designation Priorities. Endorse the Heritage Subcommittee prioritization list as attached as Appendix A, and direct staff and the Heritage Advisory Committee to begin researching and evaluating properties on the Heritage Subcommittee prioritization list in order of their prioritization, and report back to council with recommendations to designate. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I will now close that vote. And that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you very much, committee. There being no additional reports to consider for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda, we have now concluded that portion of tonight's meeting. We will now rotate and allow Councillor and Chair Tony Brunet to assume the chair at this time for the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are now at the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. We have no delegations this evening. Agenda item 8.2 reports. We will now consider report CS-0823, project update, museum courtyard and children's educational gallery. Do members of council have any questions? Councillor Rinjima.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it's not a question, but I have to comment on the beautiful design of the courtyard. It's beautiful. I love it. That's
Okay.
it.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Timmers.
I agree. I don't have any questions either because the report's very clear and, a lot of detail and very well written. But it's a beautiful, vibrant public space. And the outdoor classroom was a really great addition to that. So I agree with Councillor Rinjima. It's just gorgeous, very exciting. And to see the fracture art, the bird sculpture is really, it's just stunning. And it's so creative and it's just very well done. So thank you. And thank you to all of the museum staff and community services for always doing such an amazing job.
You ready? Excellent. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Michalak to receive and file report CS-08-23 regarding the project update, museum courtyard and children's educational gallery. And I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. Thank you, and I'll close that vote and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We will now consider report CS-09-23 regarding updates to the museum's administration and finance policy and education and interpretation policy. Do members of council have any questions? Mayor Easton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who is responding this evening.
Jessica.
Hello, Jessica. Thank you very much. Jessica, it appears as though this is winding down quite a substantial portfolio of work that's been done over a number of years. I think it's pretty well laid out here. And so is this, should council be satisfied that everything is in place as far as the policies are concerned for the museum, including the approach to the financial element? Is that what you're trying to get across here?
Through you, Chair, to Mayor Easton. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Yes, okay, good. Yes, unfortunately, we're not done the process of reviewing all the policies. We're kind of, it's very substantial work. There's a lot of research and engagement that takes place both with the Museum Advisory Committee and the ministry and then museum staff and colleagues elsewhere at museums across the province. So we've done in 2021, we did two policies, and then this year we're also bringing forward 2 policies. But we do have future policies that do require updating. They're outdated in a number of ways. So you will see in future years more policies coming forward to council for approval.
All right, Mr. Chairman, specifically, and I have a, I guess it would be page 3, if you're looking at it digitally. And it's a reference to the conservation, collections, management, and exhibition policies that were rewritten in 2021. And I just wanted to, it's just a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. The report that's being cited here is CS-03-31. That goes out quite a few years. Is that the correct number, Jessica?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor, I will double check that number and just ensure that it is correct. But those policies would have gone forward in 2021. So I'm actually assuming that should be a 2 and not a 3.
Okay, well, I didn't
Good
know
catch.
whether it, does it mean that they require a 10-year review? Is that what you're implying here?
No, I think that's a typo, Mayor.
Oh,
It should
okay.
be CS-03-21.
Okay, I'll leave that with you. And then under the museum finance and administration policy, there's a great deal of direction here that's being given by the province. And is that a change from what we were accustomed to in the past? It seemed that there was more independence.
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor, the regulations haven't changed from the province, but I will say that this policy combines both our governance and our finance standards that the province requires of us. So it is more robust than what you would have seen in the past. It took a considerable amount of research and liaising with both the ministry and other museums in the province to kind of get to this place. So I would say this is a very robust policy, more robust than we have had in the past. And with that, when I did submit the policy for review to the province, they actually requested that this be used as an example for other museums who are looking to rewrite this policy. So yes, it is more robust than we've had in the past. And I would say this is sort of, I'm aiming for best practice in all of our policies, and that's essentially what you're seeing reflected here.
Okay, and lastly, Mr. Chairman, and I understand and know that the activities of the gift shop and the money that they raise for the museum are quite separate. However, is there any place where the reference is made to their terms of reference and their commitment to the museum?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor, unfortunately, in our policy, we're unable to reference the dealings, I suppose, of their business. But so the answer would be no, it's not included in our policy.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much for all the work that everyone who's involved in bringing these policies up to standard. And I certainly appreciate the Appendix A. It's a good reminder for all of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. CEO, did you want to offer a few comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I think that was a good question that the mayor I think started off with, and I know we had a quick sidebar conversation in terms of just how do these policies and everything that the museum does work within the municipality. And I would say whether it be human resources, finance, those are handled by the municipality as any other department would be. Now, there are some regulations in terms of grants for museums under RRO 1990, Reg 877, where there's certain things, and I know it's highlighted in the report, when we get monies, we have to make certain stipulations or things clarified. But anywhere we can, and I will look to council either to nod an agreement or to provide official direction if that's indeed required. Anywhere we can, some of these policies, this is historical. I think a rebuilding of trust, bringing a number of these policies to council. I know I had conversations with staff over the last number of months. If we don't need to bring policies to council for council approval, but can update the policies we need to, that will be the approach we are taking. The museum, as much as it's a separate body, group, and agency, it is part of the municipality. It is overseen by our team, town staff. And so the separateness of it, I think, served a purpose in the past, but I would suggest that it's an amalgam of services that we all support together. And by virtue of that, if we don't need to bring things to council in terms of policy approval that are very administrative in nature to the actual committee itself, then we won't, but we can also share them for information purposes as well.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'm not seeing any other comments or any questions. So being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray to receive and file and report CS -09-23 regarding updates to the museum's administration and finance policy and education and interpretation policy, and approve and adopt the policy changes for implementation effective immediately by museum staff. And I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now consider report PW-05-23 regarding Public Works Q2 2023 update. And I will now ask the Director of Public Works to provide introductory comments. Mr. Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Just we wanted to provide our Q2 update for all of our public works projects, capital projects, and our operational programs. We also have a section in the back of the document on important regional projects in our community related to transportation and environmental services. And also a lot of these projects can also be found on our Speak Up Lincoln pages. So anytime anyone ever wants to, get an update or get more information, also this is available on Speak Up Lincoln. So both myself and Walter Neubauer are here this evening to provide any, answers to any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about project number 5, the truck bypass cameras. In the next step columns, it says, the first bullet says, debrief regularly with the MTO enforcement team and caliber on the systems and identify any refinement needs as required. What might a refinement need look like?
Three, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. It could be anything. So what we do is we have a standing frequent meeting with MTO and our service provider, because MTO are using this system to support their officers with patrolling and enforcement enhancement for trucks bypassing. So it could be anything that comes along that MTO finds that could be useful to their operations. It could be maybe further development of the program, because we are using AI technology, which is always continual it's learning as it goes. So we're always sort of refining it and based on, the user's feedback being MTO.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. project number 7. And that's Green Lane construction. And my question is particularly about the construction proposed for the east side of Ontario Street. My understanding is that the developer is not moving forward with the development at the lot at the northeast corner. Does this affect our intended timing of this construction, and how? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, thanks for the question. It's definitely something we're monitoring. Our first step right now in this project is we're initiating an EA study to really look at the best way to, upgrade Green Lane from Cedar Brook to Bartlett. And obviously, a big part of that is understanding and monitoring the different developments along that corridor. So we definitely are monitoring that development and the other developments along that area. So does it affect it? I think it's just understanding that there's going to be a development there and keeping a close eye on it and collaborating with planning on, what's happening at that corner. But there's lots of time given that we are in the EA process right now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I was wondering though, if that proposed development was part of our incentive to move forward with this construction. And was it?
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I would say it's part of it. I mean, there's a lot of developments along that corridor, New Horizons, et cetera. So our intent right now is to develop an overall plan for how we want to upgrade Green Lane in the future.
Right. So I was just referring to east of Ontario Street. I guess the EA is important. Through you, Mr. Chair, the EA is important work to do. I'm wondering though, if, for example, we'll see as we go, but if we knew right now that that property doesn't get developed for 5 years, would we still move forward with the EA? How important is the proposed construction there to the EA process?
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I would definitely recommend moving forward with the EA. It's very important for the municipality to develop a plan on how we want to upgrade Green Lane. So that's very important work to get that work done. So we have a plan and understanding that there is going to be development at that corner.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Patriva.
Oh, wait, get me all doped up on that. I'll wait.
Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Brunei. So my question was around the truck bypass camera as well. Just around the data, the monthly data. I don't know if that's something that, we've shared. I don't think we have, maybe through to Director Graham or Mr. Neubauer, whoever wants to answer that.
Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So we are definitely want to share data with council. At this point in time, we're still collecting it to sort of look at some trends to share. Because the system has been a lot of fine tuning to kind of get the system to where it is and to where we can start collecting some good data to start sharing with council. So we will be reporting back on that in the future.
Great. No, that'd be great. That'd be really good to see that, to see what's actually happening. And my other question is around the Gavora ditch, the Gavora municipal drain, through to whichever staff wants to take that. Just around, I see the award of construction early Q3. So how will we proceed and where will we begin the work on the Gavora municipal drain? Just generally, I don't need every detail. Just where are you going to start working on it first?
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So currently we're getting quotations to do the work. Once we secure a contractor and if we have favorable bid results, we'll be talking about a construction plan. But the intent is to do brushing on the entire drain. So they likely will start from the downstream end at Camden Road South and head upstream towards Mountain Road. But or they may decide to do something in the middle and stage it, but we definitely will communicate that plan once we know more on that.
All right, that's great. Just curious. So if you see any of our ducks in the Camden South part, if you could chase them home. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. So through you, a couple questions. With respect to project number 2, sidewalk repair and replacement program, we identified a missing sidewalk flank on Hillside Drive connecting, or Hickson Street connecting Barry to Hillside. Is that in this replacement program, Director?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So that particular link of sidewalk is actually included in the Aberdeen and Hillside project. So it is planned to get done, but it will be part of that project.
Okay, so next spring.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and question 2, Chair, through you. We had talked about, Director, especially in Ward 2 with the downsloping topography, about some raised cross walks at stop signs. And we weren't going to do them one at a time. We were going to bulk tender them and then go out, and I think to do 8 to 10 of them. Where are we on that?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So I'm kind of thinking you're probably referring to like Hickson Street. I know that was one that we were looking at.
Hickson and then.
Yeah, so-
Yeah.
So with that as an update, one of the projects here in our environmental services section where we are looking to upgrade the sewer diameter pipe on Hickson Street. As part of that works, we are looking at traffic calming opportunities through that project instead of sort of disrupting the road twice. We thought if we could include that in that project, that might make a lot of sense in terms of just cost savings and disruption to the community there. So that's what we're looking at currently.
Okay, that's fantastic because I couldn't find it in project for the traffic calming. And then we've also had our residents on Lincoln Avenue talking about the same. And when you shared that Black Cat data with myself and Councilor Brunei, who in turn we shared with residents, it's showing that the drop to the 40, that the speed is being exceeded. So that might be another location. And then my third question, Chair.
Go ahead.
And it's more of, well, it's to do with the regional project. So project number 2, King Street, Beamsville improvements. Mr. Graham, any whereabouts, or at what time might we see the final plans? Because again, this has come up time and time again, and especially with the new development on Lincoln Avenue, there's no safe way for residents to cross. So some type of signalization at Lincoln and King Street. I mean, it would slow traffic. It would actually make traffic stop coming into town. So it would reduce speeding. It would give us safe access for residents to cross, because currently the only safe crossing point we have is at King and Ontario Street. And a follow-up to that is that we had Mr. Vucic from the region talk about when the development at the head of Ontario Street, the Ticcarelli property, opened, that there would be intersection improvements, that they would be pinching the crosswalks and repainting and using that paint that doesn't wear away after 3 months, and changing the counters to allow our seniors safe access. So just curious, because those are two regions, but how that all dovetails together.
Director Graham?
Thanks. Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So on the first question regarding King Street improvements from Lincoln Avenue to Durham Road, or the traffic circle, if you will. It's my understanding the region is going to be hosting a public information center to share those plans with the public, because I totally agree. That is required. And they're looking at later this summer to do that. What they're going to be doing going into the fall is doing a lot of utility relocations, gas main relocates, and hydro, in preparation for the large road project to follow. So stay tuned. There will be a PIC to share those plans with the public and have some input on what they're doing with that. In terms of your other question regarding the traffic lights at Ontario and King Street, it's my understanding the region is planning on upgrading those signals later this year. And once they do that, then we can get the region to invest in more durable paint at that intersection in terms of the crosswalks. So they haven't wanted to do that yet because they are going to be doing signalization upgrades there and putting new loops in the pavement and be kind of digging up the pavement there. So my understanding that's planned for later this year.
Okay, and is the pinching of the intersection to make the crosswalks closer together, is that still in the works? Because that was promised to us a couple of years ago to go hand in glove with that. Through you, Chair.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, I'm not 100%. I will definitely loop back with you. I know the region committed to looking at that and making sure that they could still provide the proper radiuses for the traffic, et cetera, as well. So I'm not sure where that stands at the moment, but can follow up on that.
Okay, thanks, Director, because I would press them on that because I mean, daily, when I'm either leaving or coming back into town, we see, or I see, witness firsthand, and I'm sure a lot of the other councillors do, the residents from Queen Manor, either on their motorized scooters or with their walking devices, trying to get across at Queen, where there isn't any, I mean, they're taking their life in their own hands, going across to the Avondale and stuff. So, I mean, by making that intersection more accessible and shorter and more navigable for them, I think it would go a heck of a long way. And, we could have a little information session there to say to them, you know what, you don't need to take your life in your own hands. A hop, step, and a skip over, and it's safe. And that's something that we've committed to. So thank you, Director. And when we do get those PICs, because it came up at our age-friendly and active communities, that committee would like to be involved too. So I encourage you to share that with Councillor Timmers and myself so we can get the committee involved. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Bernay.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Easton.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. In regard to the second report that I believe Councillor Rajima was speaking to, the EA, Conkle Creek Trail to Bartlett Road. And I'm wondering and we've asked this question several times before, so I guess I'm just looking for the opportunity for the discussion to take place in the evaluation of the grade separation at the tracks. And is that now part of this project? Is this the appropriate place for it to come up? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Director Graham.
Through Mr. Chair to Madam Mayor, it's not part of this particular EA study. I know the region has looked at that recently as part of the development applications, and it's something we can, loop back with the region in terms of, where they are with that analysis. But it's my understanding they are looking at that, but it won't be part of the Green Lane EA study per se.
Okay, well then, Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Graham suggested it, maybe we could ask for a specific report on the upgrades that will take place there. And I should be more clear, decided on grade separation, but what are those solutions? That would be very helpful if we could have that. Project number 28, the Hickson Street sanitary sewer upgrades. The black maple trees and a number of mature trees are south of Ann Street. And I just want to make sure that when this work is being done, that consideration is going to be given so that we don't lose any of those trees. And so I guess what we're looking for is some boring or some sort of mitigation that isn't going to damage the roots. what are the plans for that, Mr. Graham?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor, and a great question. It's definitely something, we're taking very seriously. We have heard some of that feedback already. And what we're looking at is in those specific areas is using trenchless technology, more specifically with all the service laterals that connect to the main sewer. If we have to do any repairs to the service laterals, we're looking at using trenchless technology so we don't disturb or harm the trees.
All right, we look forward to that, but I guess we can expect it's going to be more costly. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chair, yeah, it will be, but it's definitely, worth not damaging those trees. So, and we're going to have an allowance in our contract, or that's the anticipation anyway. So there'll be a number of laterals that we'll be looking at, which will help sort of reduce costs on that item.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, just as a, not really housekeeping, but I think that it's difficult to know sometimes what roads we're talking about when we have Mountain Road, when we have Mountain Street, and when we have Mountain View. So maybe we could just, Mr. Chairman, so that everybody's on the same track, decide what we're going to call these streets and then stick with them, because I don't know where Mountain Road is. I know where Mountain Street is, and I know where Mountain View is, but I don't know what Mountain Road is. So maybe we could sort that one out. Anyway, it's always a great report. I very much appreciate the fact that we put as much into this as we do, and I hope the public also get a lot out of it. It's worth the investment that we're putting in it, and to have this every quarter. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Vice Chair Michalak and I sat down with Mr. Buffalino and Walter and Director Graham for a 1-hour meeting that was supposed to be 3 to 4. And we ended up shutting it down at 5:30, and we still never got through the whole document. So there's a lot there. Director Graham, I'm wondering if you could just speak to, I know we have made a decision to defer Durham Road until 2024. But when we were in the budget discussions, one of the things that we were deliberating over was, can we defer this? There was some work there that needed to be done to bring some water to a couple of businesses there. Wonder if you could update us on that and how we've been able to skate through this, or how maybe this wouldn't have impacted anything, and the delay is not really going to amount to a delay. I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Thank you, and thanks for flagging that, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so if council members may recall, when we were talking about Durham Road, prior to us coming in and doing all the road reconstruction work, there are 2 businesses who are extending water main at the north end, and that work should occur, needs to occur first before we come in and do our road work. And to date, just as an update, those parties are still working on that project. They haven't started the water main construction work yet. It's a little bit later than I think what we anticipated as well. So it sort of aligns with actually deferring our road project now, because by the time the water main work gets done, we would be probably late into the fall. And we'd want to make sure that we could pave the road before the winter season hits, if you will. So the project might have ended up getting deferred construction wise into next year anyways, I think. So I think that's just important to note for council as an update, given the other works that were pending before we could start.
Thank you, Director Graham. Councilor Patriva.
Thank you, Chair Bernay. Just, and you know what, and that tweaked me. So just looking for an update with respect to Project 11. So that was supposed to occur this year, and the holdup has been the hydro relocates. So where are we on that, Director Graham or Mr. Neubauer? Have we finally got them to commit a timeline on when they're going to get those things moving? And how do we hold their feet to the fire? Because they're the ones ultimately delaying this project.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Right now, the holdup is coordinating with a number of different utilities on Aberdeen that need to be relocated in advance of construction. We are waiting on a detailed design from one of the hydro companies. They have been very communicative with us, and my understanding is we should get some a detailed plan within the next month, and we're hopeful that they could probably get started within August or September of this year. It's important to note that each utility company will have to come in after the other, so it will take some time, but we are still on track, as far as I know at this point, to tender in early January of 2024, as we've communicated previously.
Bless you, James. Okay, that's encouraging. So, yeah, because that's, I mean, the relocation of these utilities predicates the construction that we're doing. So, just, wanted to let the public know that that's what's happening, and it will proceed as planned. So thank you, Mr. Neubauer. Thank you, Chair Bernay.
Thank you very much. There being no further sorry, Councillor Rin.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the electric charging stations. I just can't find which project it is right now. What is it? 19? Okay, thank you. I know so when we first talked about these, one of the questions I had was, are we going to be looking at solar powered charging stations? I don't know if we're that far down the road with it, but I thought I'd ask that question.
Dr. Graham.
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So at our next committee meeting, July 31st, I believe, we're going to be bringing council a full update on this report. But just quickly to your question, we aren't considering solar powered chargers at this point, but we'll definitely have opportunity to have further discussions on that at the next committee meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Easton.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to speak to project number 6. I don't think we should take the Jordan Village Improvement Project for granted. It's really outstanding in its performance, no question about it. Planning, coordination. I just keep hearing, as I'm sure we all are, good comments from the businesses, and it's even the response to the unknowns. There just doesn't seem to be any stopping them. They seem to be a team that has found a way to work together, and I don't think we should underestimate and just continue to put the accolades out there. This doesn't happen very often. Thank everybody very, very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Rinjema to receive and file report PW-05-023 regarding Public Works Update Report Q2 2023 attached as Appendix A. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close that vote. And that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There being no additional reports to consider for Community Services and Committee agenda, we now have concluded the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda, and we will now rotate and allow Councillor and Chair Lynn Timmers to assume the chair at this time for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda.
In our Business and Finance Committee portion of the agenda, we have no delegations. We will now consider report LS 7 23 terms of reference for the Age Friendly and Active Community Advisory Committee. Do members of council have any questions? Maryston, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. When the committee was formed originally, I had a discussion, I believe it was with Madam Clerk, in terms of how the recruitment would take place so that there would be a true age representation on the committee. And I'm speaking specifically to a rather broad definition of what constitutes youth. And so that is really my question, Madam Chair, to establish how that's being accomplished and what can we expect to hear from the committee in terms of how the youth of our community are being addressed through this committee, their priorities.
Thank you, Maryston. I am looking for, I guess the vice or deputy clerk. The clerk is not on the call, so I will ask Devan Kripp if she has some comments.
Thank you, Chair. And I do see the town clerk is available on the Zoom call, so I will direct that question
Okay.
to Julie.
Great, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Sorry, Madam Clerk, I didn't see you there. If you would like to comment on the
Sure.
mayor's questions.
Through the chair to the mayor. I would say that through initiatives and programs and things that the advisory committee are taking on, at such time we would engage those that we need to. But it really is dependent on the work of the committee. I know that, we have definitely tried to advertise in the past for recruitment. We've reached out to schools. I do remember that being done to get the youth on the committee. As you know, the Age Friendly and the Active Community Advisory Committee, it's not age dependent, if you will. So we want to attract as many people as we can, but we are challenged in the fact that, we get those who are interested. So we have reached out to others. We've reached out to schools. We've reached out to a number of areas. And so we're just challenged on interest. But I am hopeful that with the new form of this committee being merged by the two, that we will see some more uptake in terms of those that are interested to participate in the community.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Maryston, did you have another question or?
I think the response is the appropriate response. I'm not surprised. However, it's a little bit too general for us to really accomplish what I know Madam Clerk understands that we want to encourage, which is input. And so, when you have a specific project like the skate park, you do have interest from a certain number. If you need a new arena, you can certainly get, people interested, no question about it. So I appreciate the answer, and I would like to suggest that this should come up at the committee. It may be necessary to bring in some expertise to assist the committee with different ways to attract youth. I think that's about all I can say. I'm not an expert in this area, but I do know that this is an area that we are really lacking in. And I believe that if we're going to attract the interest of youth in maintaining a healthy community and a safe community, we need to hear from them. So I'll leave it at that. But I really feel that we need to put a different kind of energy behind this. Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Maryston. If I could just comment as a member of the Age Friendly Active Community and also a member of the original Age Friendly Advisory Committee, it's always been difficult to get youth interested in sitting on the committee. But I know discussions around our table, and Councillor Pachariva, I see you've got your mic on. We've got a lot of initiatives coming up And perhaps some of those events and things, that's a way to engage youth and maybe, create some interest in our committee through that way. Councillor Patriva, I see your mic on. I'll let you do what you want.
Yeah, thank you, Chair
comment.
Timmers, and your worship, it's a great question because I mean, we had we've got a couple asks out to regional groups for our next meeting in September. So someone's coming from Age Friendly Niagara to bring us up to speed. And we've also are going to be reaching out to Jackie Gervais to come from the region to talk about active transportation. And then also talking about how our committee members get involved on these committees. So our chair from AT before was involved with a regional active transportation. COVID came, the meetings waned, so we need to get this back on the trail. One of our committee members, Tom Clark, attended the Bike Summit, which was in Hamilton. I've attended it in the past. We've got our bronze cycling designation. One of the new things going forward is once you receive a designation, you need to renew that every 4 years. So, and if you want to go on to the next level, and that's really where I think we can get the schools involved. Having attended the summit before, it's about encouraging our youth to walk or ride to school. So you have a walk and wheel Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month. Committee's going to get out there, pitch this program to the schools. You have an award. So maybe it's a Silver Sprocket Award. So it's a chain painted silver, and you go to all the schools and you say, okay, the school with the most participation gets the coveted Silver Sprocket for the month. And then that way the youth are involved, and Councillor Brunet and I went out, and that's how Rittenhouse Road got redeveloped in the state that it was, with the active transportation, with the sidewalks, because the youth going to Swanee Valley School said it's not safe to get to school. So that's how we really need to get, on that chart, a presentation to each of the schools, get their input there, go to them, here's our contact, and then, you know what, you can help make your community better. So it's all in the works, and it's all part of checking the boxes and going forward in this, believe you me, Councillor Timmers and I will go forward at this as much as we can. So, and if we're the ones that need to go to the schools and have a chit chat, I'm not a wilting violet, so I'll do that.
We can all help.
We can, so.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Patriva. Mayor Easton, just another comment that I could add is, the Niagara Age Friendly Network tends to be seniors, all of them. And so when we created the Age Friendly Committee, our idea was it should be encompassing all ages. So, we're kind of leading the pack here. And I think bringing in the active piece might be the part that will attract youth more. So I really believe that. So anyway, thank you for your question on that. And I saw Madam Clerk had her hand up, but she's put it down. And I now see Councillor Russell has his hand up. Councillor Russell, you're not coming up on my screen here for some reason.
I think I just jumped right in.
Yes, of
You can
course,
hear me.
because you're offline, you're online.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, just a thought. Again, I was just conversing with the clerk offhand just to get some background information. One of the things that all high school students have to do prior to graduation is get 40 hours of community service in, and this may be a way to hit some of those hours by actively putting that out there on social media during the advertisements, that this is a way that if they are approaching their fourth year, or for those out there, the victory lap, that they can still get in some of those hours that are required prior to graduation. So I think this is a great way to try to lure and bring some of those people in to jump on the committee. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. If we're organizing an activity or whatever it might be, that might be a great fit for students doing community hours. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else in the queue. Thank you, everyone. So I will now ask our deputy clerk to. Oh, I need to read the motion first. Okay, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachoriva. Receive and file report LS 0723 regarding the terms of reference for the Age Friendly and Active Community Advisory Committee and approve the terms of reference as outlined in Appendix A of Report LS 07. I'll now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. We have no confidential items. Do we have any committee remarks? I am seeing none. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at. I can't see the clock exactly. It looks like about 8:07. Very good. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.